Recording with external microphone. System sound volume set to 100%.
Hello everyone, we are back again, and this is my seventh voice note to you. And as promised, I'd be discussing what I dictated to you in the previous voice note. That is the theme of the poem and metaphysical poetry. Now, let's first talk about metaphysical poetry. As I told you, meta, or meth, these are prefixes in the sense of with or among. And physics is the science of properties of matter. Now put them together. Metaphysics, that is with or among matter. In fact, there have been two approaches, two very traditional approaches to understanding anything, or especially man. Man has been a subject of poetry, literature as a whole, and obviously man is the center of all disciplines. So one approach of looking at man is spiritual. Now this approach gives more importance to spirit. स्पिरिचुअलिस्ट का ये कहना है कि इंसान की रूह सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है, रूहानी एस्पेक्ट्स पे वो सबसे ज़्यादा ज़ोर देते हैं। जिस्म की वो कहते हैं कोई वैल्यू नहीं, जिस्म तो ख़त्म हो जाता है, मिट्टी में मिल जाता है। नाउ द सेकंड अप्रोच इज़ फिज़िकल और मटेरियलिस्टिक. दिस अप्रोच गिव्स मोर इम्पोर्टेंस टू मैटर. इनका कहना यह है कि नहीं, जिस्म मोर इम्पोर्टेंट है, जिस्म जो है वो ज़्यादा अहम है, क्योंकि सोल अपने आप में कोई माने नहीं रखती जब तक कि वो, यानी जब तक जिस्म ना हो. जब जिस्म नहीं होता तो हम कहते हैं ये आदमी ख़त्म हो गया, उसका कोई वजूद ही नहीं रहता. हमें जिस्म से, मैटर से ही, दैट विच वी कैन सी एंड फील विद आवर सेंसेस, ओनली दैट इज़ इम्पोर्टेंट. नाउ मेटाफिजिक्स इज़ समथिंग इन बिटवीन with matter. The metaphysicians gave equal weightage to body and soul. They considered man as an integrated whole. Integrated whole means mutually connected system of being in which soul and body has equal importance. If you take away the soul, body alone cannot be claimed to be a man. Or if you take away the body, the soul also becomes meaningless. So this approach to understanding man, in fact, treats human being as a whole. And so for them, physical activities and physical actions are as important as spiritual actions. So the spiritualists often ignore things like sex, but the metaphysical approach does not ignore such things. So for them, matter is as important as soul. This philosophy is reflected in metaphysical poetry. Now the question is, in what way metaphysical poetry is different from other poetry? You see, I have dictated you several characteristics. For example, metaphysical poetry is known for its wit and conceit. Wit वैसे तो कहते हैं होश को, लेकिन कोई बहुत ही क्लेवर आइडिया जो है वो एक विटी रिमार्क कहलाता है. सो क्लेवरनेस, विट, विजडम, कोई बहुत ही ऐसी बात कह देना छोटे से जुमले में जो बहुत ही मानी खेज हो, फुल ऑफ मीनिंग हो. such statements are common in metaphysical poetry, and it depends on conceit. Conceit is a comparison. Now metaphysical conceit, अब देखिए जितने भी comparisons होते हैं उनका ऑब्जेक्टिव एक होता है, वो ये कि सिमिलैरिटी बतलाना. जैसे हम अगर मेटाफोर के बारे में सोचें तो एज ब्यूटीफुल एज अ रोज, दोनों में कॉमन क्या हुआ? ब्यूटी. बट conceit is a comparison in which dissimilarity is more striking than similarity. यानी सिमिलैरिटी तो होती है, लेकिन जो हमारी तवज्जो खींचती है, जो बात जो हमें अट्रैक्ट करती है बात, वो सिमिलैरिटी नहीं बल्कि डिससिमिलैरिटी है. For example, in one of his poems called Sun Rising, Donne compares the beloved to a state, STATE, state. जी हाँ, जैसे मॉडर्न स्टेट्स आप पॉलिटिकल साइंस में पढ़ते होंगे, रियासत, सल्तनत. अब सिमिलरली तो ऐसा लगता है जैसे इनके बीच में कोई भी कॉमन बात नहीं है. और यही चीज़ हमें अट्रैक्ट करती है कि एक बिलवेड स्टेट कैसे हो सकती है. सिमिलैरिटी है. यू नो, द बिलवेड इज़ लाइक अ स्टेट and the lover is like a prince or a ruler, and just as a state belongs to the ruler, so the beloved belongs to the lover. So इस तरह के comparisons in क्या हैं? In our poem also there is a conceit, full constant, growing and full constant light, which I dictated to you in the theme. I'll come to it when I will explain theme. Then the other factor is that logic and intellect. You know, they logically define their feelings, give a logic behind them, try to prove logically and even scientifically. And lot of intellect, a lot of learning is shown. You know, a lot of learning. And their approach is argumentative. इनकी approach emotional नहीं होती जैसे romantics की थी, बल्कि ये argument देते हैं अपने favor में, अपने against में. If and but. You know, when we study metaphysical poetry, we come across something like premise major, premise minor. ये philosophy के terms हैं. जैसे कि हम कहते हैं if P is not P, ये प्रेमिस माइनर हो गया. देन P इज Q. यू नो, इफ P इज नॉट P एंड F इज नॉट P, अगर P और इफ F इज नॉट P एंड D इज नॉट P, देन P इज P. ये तीन हमारे पास प्रोपोजिशन हो गई. F इज नॉट P, प्रेमिस माइनर. D इज नॉट P, premise major. अब इनका कंक्लूजन क्या हुआ? देन P इज P. जब D P नहीं है, F P नहीं है, तो फिर P क्या है? P है. So this kind of logic is applied. So if and but comes a lot in metaphysical poetry. If this happens, then this will be the conclusion. If that happens, then that will be the conclusion, and then they draw the final conclusion. You also find fusion of thought and feeling. Often critics say that there is no feeling in metaphysical poetry. ये कहना गलत है. मेटाफिजिकल कोई भी लिटरेचर जो है, यहाँ तक कि न्यू क्लासिक जो मैंने आपको बताया, जो पर्सनल एलिमेंट्स उनमें नहीं होते थे, लेकिन फीलिंग्स होती हैं. ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता कि लिटरेचर में फीलिंग्स ना हो. हाँ, वो फीलिंग्स इम्पर्सनल हो जाती हैं. रोमांटिक्स के केस में जैसे फीलिंग्स एक्सप्रेस्ड होती हैं, उस तरह से फीलिंग्स एक्सप्रेस नहीं होती मेटाफिजिकल पोइट्री में, उस लिरिकल पैटर्न में, बल्कि यहाँ लॉजिकल पैटर्न में फीलिंग एक्सप्रेस होती हैं. वो थॉट में ही मिक्स्ड होती हैं. फ्यूजन ऑफ थॉट एंड फीलिंग. डायरेक्ट utterances. The poet or the speaker in the metaphysical poetry utters, his views or directly. कोई तमहीद किसी भी किस्म के बैकग्राउंड या इंट्रोडक्शन की ज़रूरत नहीं है. नो, he directly expresses his feelings. Then abrupt beginning of the poem. Poems usually begin abruptly, in which the speaker asks the person to do this or that, or begin addressing the beloved, or um, in a very abrupt manner. आपको ऐसा लगा कि अचानक से कहीं से भी बात करनी शुरू कर दी और कहीं से कहीं लाके मिला दी. Then startling imagery. इनकी images जो होती हैं वो बहुत सरप्राइजिंग होती हैं. ऐसा नहीं है like other poets, that they would all the time refer to things of beauty, rose, nature. नहीं, very surprising imagery, unusual imagery, और उससे इनकी wide range of learning भी शो होती है. जैसा कि हम अपनी पोएम में देखेंगे, shadow is used as an effective medium to communicate his ideas in such a way that perhaps you may not have come across so far. Now let's analyze Eliot's remark. You see, Eliot said that metaphysical poets felt their thoughts as immediately as the odor of a rose. Odor means smell. O-D-O-U-R, odor. तो फूल की खुशबू हम महसूस करते हैं, सोच के नहीं. यानी मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि पहले हम सोचें फिर बताएं ये अच्छी स्मेल है या नहीं है. अगर खुशबू अच्छी है तो हम एकदम ही महसूस कर लेते हैं. इसी तरह से in the same way the metaphysical poets felt their ideas. रिजल्ट ये हुआ कि उनके साथ उनके आइडियाज़ ही, यानी उनकी फीलिंग्स ही उनके आइडियाज़ बन जाते थे और उनके आइडियाज़ ही उनके एक्सपीरियंस बन जाते थे. जैसे डन के बारे में कहा, a thought to Dunn was an experience and it modified his sensibility. देखिए, थॉट और चीज़ है. फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल यू थिंक ऑफ फ्लाइंग, लेकिन अभी आपको मान लें कि एक्चुअल एक्सपीरियंस नहीं हुआ एरोप्लेन में बैठने का, तो वो जो एक्चुअल एक्सपीरियंस है वो और होगा और थॉट और आइडिया और होगा. लेकिन मेटाफिजिकल पोइट्स के केस में ये अपने थॉट को इतना इंटेंसली महसूस करते थे कि वो इनके साथ एक्चुअल एक्सपीरियंस बन जाता था. दैट इज़ वाई देयर पोइट्री बिकेम सो पावरफुल. So remember these characteristics of metaphysical poetry. Now we can discuss the theme. You see, the theme of metaphysical poetry. This one, a lecture upon shadows. Yes. So it's a love poem, and Donne expresses his concept of love in it. And he believes that love is constant yet dynamic. Now this seems to be contradictory. How can a thing be constant yet dynamic? But it is possible. ऐसा हो सकता है कि कोई चीज़ constant भी हो और dynamic भी हो. Dynamic मतलब developing. For example, if you switch on a bulb and put your hand on the bulb, तो बल्ब की रोशनी तो कांस्टेंट ही रहेगी. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि वो रोशनी यानी कम ज़्यादा होती रहे. जितनी वोल्टेज उसका बल्ब है उतनी ही रोशनी रहेगी. बट आफ्टर सम टाइम यू विल फील मोर हीट. सो व्हाट इज़ दिस? दिस इज़ ग्रोइंग इन इंटेंसिटी. Similarly, if you stand in the sun, so for a couple of minutes or so, the light would almost remain the same. There would be no major change, but you will feel more heat. So it is one of the characteristics of love. It remains consistent, selfless, there is no selfishness in it, and eternal, everlasting. Now see, it is constant in the sense that the passion of love remains the same. That passion never changes no matter what age the lovers grow. They may grow old, they may lose physical charm, they may lose beauty, etc. They may not feel as attractive as they were when they were young, and still they, will have the same passion for each other if they have a genuine love. And it is dynamic in the sense that it always keeps on growing in intensity. So this is reflected by, uh, you know, in fact, there are other characteristics also. Uh, True love, in fact, becomes a source of perpetual joy and a source of guidance for the lovers. Now, these characteristics are illustrated by the conceit, the comparison which I talked earlier. Growing and full constant light, ये की phrases हैं इस poem में, यानी light grow करती हुई और constant भी हो. So, these phrases, this phrase clearly reflects all the tendencies that we have discussed so far. Now, remember one more thing, that genuine love, according to this poet, actually never declines. There is no way downwards. Um, in Persian, there is a saying, Har uruje zawalast. That is, if you, if you have a zenith, if you have the highest point, then after you touch the highest point, you will come to the lowest, and this process continues. Even, when the sun is at its highest at the noon, what happens? The sunlight then gradually begins to decline. That's because scientifically we know that the earth keeps moving away from the sun. The sun also keeps revolving, but somehow, the light keeps decreasing, and there comes a time when we say that the sun has set. So, उरूज के बाद ज़वाल होता है, but there is nothing like that in genuine love. The moment it comes down, like say it is at 180 degree, and if it comes to 179 degrees, that is the end of love, the death of love, the night of love, as it is called in the poem. And this, in fact, is very much in accordance with what we discussed earlier, that the passion of love always remains the same. There should be absolutely no decline in it if it is genuine. So this is the central idea of the poem. Now see what we have done. We have, noted down the difficult words of the poem. We have discussed what metaphysical poetry is, what are the characteristic features of the poetry of Donne, and what is the poem about. What is the major theme of the poem. Now I'll introduce underscore here some of the important points of the poem before I close this note and come to the other one. In fact, we'll start discussing the poem in the other note, because already I think I have taken 15 to 17 minutes. So let's see the characteristics or the point of focus in the poem. You see, the poet makes use of the shadows quite a lot in the poem. We'll see what are the different meanings of the shadows, what are the symbolic implications, and there are shadows before noon, shadows after noon, what do they stand for. Then interestingly, love is described as light. Still, the poet talks about shadows. We'll find out reason for that. Remember here that shadow, when he talks of shadow, it helps him establish a contrast between darkness and light. And love, as we know, is light. It's not darkness. So it becomes very useful when he uses the the image of shadow, so that he can highlight that aspect of love, that it becomes a guiding force. Then the poet seems to be talking to his beloved in the poem. You see, we'll focus on the message that he wishes to convey to her, and the message is the theme itself that I have dictated to you. And interestingly, instead of calling it a lecture upon love, because the poem is about love, the poet gives it the title A Lecture Upon Shadows. This is interesting. A lecture upon the shadow. This affects our reading of the poem. You know, if you call it, if I mean, had the poet called it a lecture upon love, then we would have taken it as something very normal. There are hundreds and thousands of love poems written. What is extraordinary, so extraordinary about it? Maybe we would have skipped it and not read it. But then, when we read the title, it captures our attention immediately, and it strikes us, and we realize a lecture upon shadows. Oh, we wonder what the poet is going to talk about, and so we immediately start reading the poem. And not only that, um, in this unusual way, he attracts our attention and logically defines his feeling of love. So these are some of the important aspects of the poem. It'll help you answer the questions at the end of the poem. So, keeping the length of time in mind, it's about to be 20 minutes, more than 20 minutes in fact, again. So let me close this voice note here, and in the next voice note we will straight away start discussing the poem. So for now, it's goodbye from me.
Device unlocked. Pause button.